I wanted to just extend a warm welcome to Mayor Mahan for coming here and spending some time with us. And it's a very special occasion, and thank you. For those of you who don't remember me, I'm a kind of a new member. I'm Mike Popovich. They also call me the Kid, right? That's my nickname now. But we wanted to invite Mayor Mahan to come and talk about the state of the city. There's a lot of initiatives with homeless and improving the quality of life in San Jose. And since he's taken office in January, he's been out in front and has had a leadership style of leading from the front. So with that, please extend a warm welcome to Mayor Matt Mahan. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here with you all. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike, for that kind. The Kid, is that his nickname? Yeah. The Kid. All right. I'm going to call him that. I appreciate the invitation, Mike, and thank you all for having me. Just so I'm aware, how much time do we have? I don't want to just talk at you the whole time. What do you have?
Right now, we literally have till 2 o'clock before we have to vacate.
Okay.
So you have as much time as you need.
Great.
Your schedule will dictate.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Okay, well, thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Okay, so why don't we do this? I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of what we got in this year's budget, the things we've been prioritizing, some of the initiatives that I'm trying to drive forward, and then I'd love to hear from you and open it up to your questions and hear your priorities. So here's where we are. I have pushed for a back to basics approach. When I came into office in January, I looked at our city roadmap. I had seen it because I was a council member for a couple of years. And what always bothered me about that roadmap was that there was no focus to it. We had 42 priorities across an incredible range of issues. And when you have 42 priorities, do you think you have any priorities? Not really. Certainly not for the city staff. And so I came in and said, let's try to boil this down to the 3 to 5 most essential things that your city government can actually move the needle on. And if we do, it's going to open up other opportunities for us, because we all want to have longer library hours and better parks and lots of nice to have amenities that are important but require tax revenue. And you can't grow the tax base, at least not organically. I don't think we want to raise our taxes anymore, but you can't have that growth to fund things like longer library hours and nicer parks and more after-school programs. You can't do that if you don't have a city that's thriving and growing, where there's investment and where people want to spend their time and their money. And so we boiled it down to really 4 things. And you see the top 3 here, and then I'll explain what the 4th is, because it follows on from these 3. So the first, of course, is safety. Most important responsibility of government, in my view, is to keep people safe and guarantee your ability to exercise your basic rights and freedoms. So, Stephen, we're going to go into the details here of these, so I won't say more on what we're doing there. The second is homelessness. Having thousands of people living outside in our city is inhumane and horrible for them, and it's terrible for everybody. And then, of course, related to that is having a city that is clean and beautiful. You should drive around your city and take pride in the place where you live. And when I was out knocking on doors, I heard from a lot of you that you felt like San Jose had lost its civic pride. And then the 4th area for me is really economic development, being an easier place to invest and do business. And that gets into permitting and other things along those lines. So, Stephen, why don't we jump in here and get into safest big city in America. This budget, my first budget, doubles the rate at which we hire police officers. And, all right, I've got a friendly audience here. So, well, it sounds like we're pretty aligned, at least on that one. So we are significantly understaffed in San Jose in terms of our public safety sector. We have 11 police officers for every 10,000 residents. The average of the 25 largest cities is about 26 officers, so over 2 times as many officers per capita. Now, we are a relatively safe big city, But we're not the safest big city in America again, and our 911 response times are far longer than they should be, and we don't have the capacity to do as much community policing or have as much presence as we would like to see. So I've prioritized in the budget funding to expand headcount. We are now, for the first time, because we're doing this, for the first time in years, we're at the point where our biggest limiting factor on hiring police officers is not headcount authorized in the budget, it's qualified applicants and getting people through the academy. And that's where we need to shift now. We now are at a point where, and I hope we can keep this going, where our budget commitments are ahead of our staffing levels, but now we've got to work to encourage young people to consider careers in law enforcement. And that's a real challenge these days. A lot of people don't feel that it's a job that is maybe as respected or as rewarding as it once was. And I think it's an incredible job, and we've got to celebrate our public safety, our first responders, police and fire, and folks who put their lives on the line to protect others, to encourage folks to apply. We've seen, believe it or not, just to give you a statistic, in the last 5 years, we've seen an 80% decline in applications to our police academies. So the budget, and I don't know if there it is, we put additional funding, in fact, doubled the budget, pretty modest budget to begin with, to be clear, but we doubled the budget for police outreach and marketing, going to college campuses, going out and giving officers, paying officers overtime to go interact with young people and tell them about how rewarding the career can really be, because we've got to inspire people to consider these jobs. Let's keep going. Another thing we're doing on the safety front is using technology. We're investing in automatic license plate readers, relatively new technology. It's been essential, particularly because we have those low staffing levels. It's been a very valuable tool in identifying the crime rings that are doing the catalytic converter thefts and smash and grab robberies and other serious crime, because we now have at 72 intersections in the city, and right now that's all we have the funding for, but we've picked carefully the right intersections where we know when and where a vehicle was based on license plate. Now, it may be a stolen vehicle, but in many cases, we've been able to then use that for follow-up investigations. We can keep going. Okay. On homelessness, why don't we go to the next slide, Stephen? Here's the starting point for me, because a lot of people in California feel hopeless about homelessness. But I want to give you hope from right here in our country, which is looking at the Northeast and the Midwest. And we'll get to this in a moment. But when you look at the rate of unsheltered homelessness per capita, you look at Boston and New York, for example, believe it or not, they have as many homeless people as we do on a per capita basis, because the things that cause homelessness, so mental illness, addiction, job loss, unexpected health issues, abuse and messy divorce, all the different things that happen in people's lives that can lead to becoming homeless are pretty even across populations. You don't see a huge difference. Now, San Francisco and the drug situation may be a little different, but in general, you don't see huge variation there. But in Boston and New York, the unsheltered rate, the number of people living outside in tents, is very low. In Boston, it's 3%. In New York, it's 5%. In San Jose, it's about 70%. San Francisco, Oakland, it's even a little bit worse. LA, a little bit worse. So why do you think that is?
Weather.
The weather. All right, climate. Yeah, correct. So I told you it was hopeful. Now, we could throw our hands up and we could say, well, we've got good weather, so we'll never be able to solve this. Or we could say, and this is my belief, what is it that the weather forces these cities to do? These cities have become shelter-first cities and states because they have said it's not humane, it's not politically feasible to let thousands of people freeze to death out on the streets. So they build basic shelter. They also, one form of shelter, by the way, is inpatient treatment facilities as a starting place for people. And they go out and they require people come indoors. I didn't get 100% of people indoors, but you see the difference. That, to me, has to be the strategy for California is we have to muster the political will to build safe, dignified indoor places for people to go. Transitional, that could be congregate shelter, transitional and interim housing, safe parking sites with on-site services, mental health and addiction treatment centers, and we've got to require that people come inside. Now, when I say require, people often look at me and kind of squint and say, well, what do you mean by that? Okay, so it is a little complicated, I'll admit. We're not going, and the Ninth Circuit Court's not going to allow us to go handcuff people and forcibly drag them indoors somewhere. But I think we can have a lot more accountability than we do today. And I will tell you right now, it's been underreported in, but we are literally doing this right now along the Guadalupe River in downtown San Jose, along a roughly third of a mile stretch. We are spending money to offer people interim housing. We have told them that we will be abating the encampment, which we are now doing this week. And we are offering people a place to go. And we're telling them we are going to clear this encampment and it will become a place of no return. We will not allow re-encampment. And to me, that's the formula. And that's what you see in places like Boston and New York and Chicago, forced on them by the weather. They have built basic indoor dignified places for people to go, and they require people come. The weather requires people to come inside. We have to be willing to abate encampments and not allow return and tell people, here are your options, but otherwise you're going to have to go find somewhere else to camp if you don't want to come indoors. And I think you keep doing that until people eventually accept shelter. Because you can't handcuff somebody to make them come inside, but you can abate the encampment and keep them moving around until they eventually accept shelter. I think there has to be more accountability on both sides. I'll tell you right now, though, the reality is we have a long waiting list for people out there who want a tiny home, who want a shelter, and we're out of capacity. We have a long waiting list. So the biggest first move we need to make is scaling up shelter and treatment centers. Okay, I don't even know what else is in the slides there on the homelessness, but that's the basic idea. So we are investing. Here's been the big debate at City Council, by the way. If you talk to a council member, you can, if you agree with me on my behalf, give them an earful on this. The big debate has been whether or not we should put more money and effort into immediate solutions or short-term solutions that can get people off the streets faster. That includes prevention. Somebody has an unexpected job loss or health issue, we can bridge them for a few months and keep them housed. Safe parking, interim housing, the sort of immediate response that I'm advocating for, versus we're spending most of your dollars to address homelessness, building brand new apartments, so-called affordable housing, at a cost of literally $1 million a door and over 5 years to build. And don't get me wrong, we need affordable housing. We have a lack of workforce housing. There are a lot of reasons for that. We can get into CEQA and environmental review and slow permitting times and labor regulations and growth boundaries and on and on and on, all the things we've done in California to make it very hard to build housing. But I don't think that it's feasible for us to say that our primary solution to street homelessness is going to be building brand new apartments at $1 million a door. It just doesn't scale. That's literally what we're doing. And that's been the debate at City Council, is how to turn that dial. I have argued that while we need affordable housing, we should move away from being 80-20 to the permanent affordable units toward more closer to 50-50 until we get down the number of people living outside significantly. And that's the debate that we're in. And unfortunately, I did not have enough votes on the council this year to force that reallocation of your Measure E tax revenue. So that's just something for us to think about is, are we going to prioritize the most significant human suffering and get people off the streets faster and stabilized and connected to services? Or are we going to play this long game that may never materialize of maybe 30, 40 years down the road building enough affordable housing for everyone who needs it? I don't know how we ever get there, but that's what we're debating right now. I talked about the impact of tiny homes, prefab modular units. These are our quick build communities. And what you see here is, for the first time in a decade, as we scaled up basic shelter, these are modular units, individual room with a door that locks, in some cases a little in-suite private bathroom, in some cases congregate bathrooms. But as we've scaled those up in the city of San Jose, we've seen a decline in unsheltered homelessness for the first time in a decade. In fact, this year, we are down 10% year over year on unsheltered homelessness. And it's been a team effort, and these solutions have been in progress now for the last couple of years, but it's finally starting to hit a tipping point because we're getting some scale. And frankly, there's no free lunch here, as economists like to say. I wish there was an easy answer. You know, sometimes I knock on people's doors, and I get it. Maybe I catch them at a bad moment, and they say, well, just make them move along. Tell them to go somewhere else. But we've got 4,500 people out there. The state of California has 170,000 people out there. So we're going to have to build indoor places and require people come inside. And I don't see another way out of this crisis, frankly. These communities work. Of all the people who have entered one of our interim sites in the last 3 years since we built the first one, 70% remain housed today, and 50% were able to resolve their situation to the point that they were able to graduate into permanent housing. In many cases, because we had job training and job placement on site for folks, and we're doing case management and counseling to help people manage addiction and depression and mental illness, PTSD, and all the rest. One other thing I'll just note, because here's the key part here, though, for all of you to think about. So we get this far in the presentation, and you know what people always say when they're being honest with me? They say, "This sounds great, Matt. Let's do more of it. Great solution. Just whatever you do, don't do it near my neighborhood." And I get it. People feel, and that's human nature. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. It's human nature. But we've got to put it somewhere. And thus far, we have 6 of these communities. We have another one being built at Branham and Monterey, and we're looking at a couple of other sites in the city. Here's the key thing, though, to think about. We've looked at the data when we've built one of these interim communities, which, by the way, has 24/7 security, on-site case management, individual rooms with a door that lock, et cetera. We look at the 12 months after a site opens to the 12 months prior. And what we consistently see is residents, the neighbors within a half mile, calls for service for crime and for blight go down. Because what's happening is this. We're getting people who are in unmanaged encampments with no management, no rules, unfettered access to drugs, and on, and we're moving them into a site that's controlled and managed with security, with ingress, egress, exit, access control. Can't have drugs, can't have weapons. You're on a plan to better yourself. You have a counselor. You're in a job. So, well, I said there's no free lunch. Everything requires trade-offs, and nobody likes the idea of an interim housing facility going in near their neighborhood. The truth is, it makes the neighborhood better. It actually reduces crime and blight because we got to get people indoors. And I know we can't do it alone. We need Palo Alto to do it too. And I'm working at the state level to try to create more accountability for some of our wealthier, smaller neighbors to do it as well. And some of them are. Mountain View's been a good actor. Sunnyvale's building one now. Palo Alto's building one now. So we're starting to see more of a fair share approach, which I appreciate. Okay. I mentioned job training. I really love this program. This was another frustration of mine during the budget process. Sorry, I don't mean to block your view. I wanted to double this program. We do this with goodwill. It's called our San Jose Bridge program. We pay homeless people to clean up the city, 20 hours a week, hourly wage. And then the other 20 hours a week, we get job training. And we give them job training in more sustainable careers. Being a truck driver, an electrician, being in one of the other building trades, being a line cook, jobs that are currently open that pay. The target goal here is to pay $25 or more per hour. So people could have a chance of actually surviving in the area. I met a guy, George, and his wife, Christy, lived in a trailer near Coyote Creek, I think it was, for 3 years. We relocated them into one of our quick build communities, got them enrolled in the San Jose Bridge program. She's learning to become an electrician. He just got a job as a truck driver out of Livermore, making $90,000 a year, and they're signing a lease on a new apartment, and they're going to be self-sufficient. But they were living in a trailer for 3 years next to the creek. So it's possible. Not everybody's going to turn it around. But there's a surprising number of people out there who, if given the stability and the services, have a real shot at getting to greater self-sufficiency. So I wanted to double this program we couldn't figure out how to make the trade-offs in the budget. There wasn't enough support on the council. So I'm going to make another run at this next year. But I think it's the best dollars we can spend on homelessness because we don't set someone up for permanent dependency of being in a, we build these $1 million apartments. It takes us 5 years. We spend $1 million in public subsidy to build them. In fact, the last one was 1.1 million. And then typically we're trying to figure out how to get the person on a Section 8 voucher so that we can then subsidize the cost of the housing for the rest of their lives, rather than doing everything we can to empower people to have greater self-sufficiency. So I think we've got to think a little differently about our approach here. All right, let's keep going. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. You know what the problem is. You see it as you drive around the city. I believe that 75% of our blight issues would be taken care of if we got people indoors and connected to services. But there's also graffiti, and if we go to the next slide, Stephen. We, in this budget, made our Beautify SJ team permanent. That's actually me out there with a couple of city contractors, and they're a rapid response team. My view is, I'll hold up my phone here. I think in the capital of Silicon Valley, you should be able to go anywhere in our city, take a photo of a pothole or some illegal dumping or some graffiti or a street light that's out, have it automatically geolocated, routed to the right department, and then get a push notification back a day or two later showing you that it was taken care of by the appropriate department. Part of that, though, is we need a service delivery team. So we invested in Beautify SJ. If we go to the next slide, Stephen. This is that 311 app I'm talking about. So we have it on your phone. You can also dial it. You can call 311, and you can go to the website. You can just go online to San Jose 311 to report issues. We're not perfect, but I'll tell you, when I started chairing our technology committee 2 years ago, we had 2/3 of people who called 311 said they had a bad experience. We now have over 2/3 of people who call 311 tell us they had a good experience, that the problem was resolved. So we're trying to bring city services to the customer, to the resident, make it on demand, in your pocket, easy to access, and then close the loop and actually fulfill the service delivery, actually get it done. We're still sometimes over-promising. One area where we're over-promising is abandoned vehicles. We'll let you report abandoned vehicles, but we're doing a terrible job of managing them on the other side. So we just upgraded a tow contract so that we can actually do more towing, which has been a big barrier. So this was a big area. We're starting to wind down in the slides here, but if you read the Merck or other local press, you may have seen we had a big debate over union contracts at the city. Some of our bargaining units, we had 11 different unions representing different groups within the city. We're negotiating with 7 of them this year. 3 of them came in at a 12% increase over 3 years, which we had baked into the budget. Typically, we estimate 3 to 4% increase each year depending on revenue. So they settled at 12. County workers, SEIU, settled. We had 4 other bargaining units that wanted 25% over 3 years, which was crazy. We got them down, but not as far as I thought we should have. Essentially, I was in support of up to 85% of what they wanted, up to that 13% level. We could offer them 13% over 3 years without cutting your services. Well, despite my frustration and warning, the council decided to go to 14.5% over 3 years, which forced us to cut $3 million out of the budget this year, and our budget office projects $20+ million worth of deficits over the next 2 years. I, by the way, was very proud of the fact that of the 3 big cities in the Bay Area, we're the only one that ran a surplus this year. But now the next 2 years, we're looking at about $20 million worth of deficits. So we're going to have, over the next couple of years, some tough conversations and trade-offs to make as we have to cut some services to pay for raises that are frankly outpacing revenues. And I get it. My dad was a letter carrier. My mom was a teacher. My dad was in a union, and our workers, did their job. The unions representing them did their job, certainly maybe a little too well. It was the council that I don't think struck the right balance between our workers' needs and our residents' needs. And I get it. It's a very expensive place to live. I totally understand why the workers are fighting for more pay. But at the end of the day, I just think as a matter of principle, we should never offer raises that are unsustainable and force us to cut services. And by the way, I'll just note, because it was underappreciated and didn't seem to make it into the paper, in addition to the service cuts this year and next year and maybe the year after, it just added over $60 million to our unfunded pension liabilities. Don't you think we would have learned that lesson after Measure B and Measure F and everything we've been through over the last 20 years? 15% of our general fund every year comes off the top to pay for the unfunded pension liability. That's $4 billion. We just added another $60 million to it. We could have of government captured by interest groups and politicians who are more responsive, frankly, to the groups that spend the most money in local elections than really the need of the whole community. So that's the backstory on that. Unfortunately, we will see some cuts. I don't know, there are some recent initiatives, but I think maybe I've given you enough content. Should we stop and open it up to your questions? Or we've got, yeah, why don't we open it up? I'm sure you all have some good questions. Go ahead.
I'll start out. I've been following what's been happening with the homeless and that, and I was surprised and pleased that our governor joined with 20 states, Republican states, to ask the Supreme Court to hear the cases that the Ninth Circuit has done on the homeless situation in their decisions from 2018 and 2020 in Oregon. Yeah. Do you get anything, because I haven't heard whether that's going through or not, to get it on the Supreme Court docket so we can get that, because I see that as a big problem for all West Coast and good weather cities.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And maybe if I could, I'll say two things on that. One about exactly what you asked, and then a related issue that the governor's been involved in. I've been talking with him about, actually. On your first point, are you all familiar with Martin v. Boise? So that's kind of at the heart of this. This was a Ninth Circuit Court decision, and you're right, there have been subsequent decisions. The courts on the West Coast, this is the Ninth Circuit Court of the U.S. Supreme Court, decided a few years back in Boise that the city was violating people's constitutional liberties by basically picking them up in encampments and taking them to a shelter. And that has really put a damper on cities on the West Coast where we have such great weather, which is a compounding factor, have made it harder for us to get people indoors. And I think the governor's right to push on this. I've been pushing on it. I think the formula and what we need to go argue for in front of the courts, and we've told the governor we're here to support his effort, is the principle I just laid out, which is basic dignified shelter. And there are different ways to define that. What most people agree with, including most homeless people, is you give somebody a little room with a door that locks. That's good enough to be, that's a big deal, and it's safe and it's secure, and that's the starting point. If we can hit that bar, we ought to be able to prohibit encampments and tell people they either have to come inside or find somewhere else to camp. And that doesn't mean arresting people, but it just means we're going to keep abating encampments and moving people around, saying you can't be permanently encamped. Here's your option. It's a room with a door that locks. That's the fight that we're in, and we're just hoping and making our best arguments and using examples to help the Ninth Circuit Court make an informed decision and hopefully not further tie our hands. But there's been a lot of ambiguity, a lot of threatened lawsuits. You saw the injunction in San Francisco, and cities are on the front lines trying to get people indoors and losing the levers to compel people to come inside. Let me touch on one other piece of this, though, because I think it's directly relevant to your question. We're seeing a shift, and I have to give the governor credit here as well. We're seeing a shift on mental health. Now, belatedly, to be clear, we should have been doing this as a state a long time ago. But you go back to the 60s, late 60s, conservatorship, reform, Lanterman, Petrus Shore. We stopped caring for our severely mentally ill residents. And you see the results of that today. The pendulum, thankfully, and not without a fight, by the way, it is swinging back. And there's a senator who deserves a lot of credit if you haven't looked her up, Senator Susan Eggman in the Central Valley. She's carried most of the legislation The governor's been willing to sign it. There have been a few big city mayors, including the mayor of San Diego, me, and a few others, mayor of Sacramento, who have been very vocal on this. There are three pieces to this that are moving forward. One that passed last year called Care Court. Care Court establishes a county-level superior court that would have a judge who could mandate someone into treatment. The bill that was just signed this weekend by the governor, also carried by Senator Eggman, is SB 43, which expands the definition of gravely disabled. Because right now, if you ask a police officer, when they're talking to somebody on the street, unless the person says very explicitly, I want to hurt myself, I want to end my life, or I want to hurt that person, they don't feel that they have the grounds legally to detain someone and bring them in to the EPS, our emergency psychiatric facility here. This would expand the definition of gravely disabled to include being chronically homeless and unable to feed yourself, not being able to pass certain sort of evaluative standards from a mental health professional, so that somebody could be brought into a care court and compelled into care. But there's one piece left. It's a three-legged stool. And next year on the ballot, you will have the opportunity to vote for the third leg of the stool. Those first two legs of the stool don't work if you don't have anywhere to send people. And what will be on the ballot next year is a reform to the Mental Health Services Act that generates $1 to $2 billion a year in revenue. If it passes, it will allow us to bond. We're not adding new revenue. We're just changing the use of existing revenue. We can bond against a portion of that revenue to build inpatient treatment. Because what's happened is that revenue has all gone to the easy, low-hanging fruit. It all goes to voluntary programs that are almost exclusively outpatient. That means you know you have a problem, you want help, you sign up and make an appointment, and then you show up every 2 to 4 weeks for a counseling appointment. Well, who does that help? It helps some people, don't get me wrong, but it does nothing for the folks on the streets who are severely mentally ill. So this will allow us to add 14,000 inpatient beds of different levels of acuity, including secure inpatient treatment centers where someone could actually be held for 90 days, 120 days, 180 days. Because if you're addicted to methamphetamine, you need minimum, and this is minimal, this is not enough, but minimum you need 90 days just to start to clear your head because of how severe that chemical addiction is. Today, you're lucky to get 24 hours at Valley Med and you're right back out on the streets. And so this is where we need to go. Now, unfortunately, we're so belated in this that even if we do all this, we're still a few years away from really seeing the impact, unfortunately. Anyway, that's the update on that front, because I think it relates to your point about getting people off the streets.
Absolutely, yeah, because I was so sad to see Agnew taken away, and that was back under Reagan administration. And that I have seen cause many of the problems that we're seeing today on the streets.
Undoubtedly.
I'm glad to hear and thank you for the information of our state actions.
It's finally happening. I think I called on him and then I'll come here. I apologize. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
With respect to the Second Amendment, is the district attorney, the assistant district attorney, are the prosecuting criminals that are illegally carrying illegal possession of firearms, be it rifle, pistol, or shotgun, or are they just letting that go? Because what they found out in so much research, that has to be prosecuted to prevent illegal possessors of firearms hurting or killing legal possessors of firearms.
Yeah. Great question. In my conversations with the DA, the answer has been an emphatic yes. I have had my complaints around prosecuting drug-related crime, and I can talk a little more about that. But he does take illegal gun possession seriously, and I want to add one thing to that, and we can certainly, if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to follow up with the DA on your behalf and try to get answers. But an important piece of this, it's something he and I have talked about at a high level, is the police capacity and supporting our officers in being proactive, and when something seems wrong, being able to initiate a stop or a search. And again, it's another area where there's certainly an ongoing and active debate going on, but our officers do tremendous work. I mean, even if you just follow it on social media, our department is out there being proactive and taking a lot of guns, a scary number of illegal guns off the streets all the time. So that's an important part. On the drug side, though, with Prop 47, many other crimes that once could be were or could become felonies have been basically permanently downgraded to misdemeanors, which means we've lost a lot of the leverage we had for compelling people to sign up for a treatment program. You used to be able to take somebody who was repeatedly committing crime while under the influence, low-level crime, vandalism and low-level theft, and threaten them with jail time, and the hope was that as an alternative to jail time, they would sign up and actually stick with a treatment program. And we've really taken away that tool. And that's an area where the DA and I have been less aligned, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah, I think I said I'd come here next.
Yeah.
And then
I think it was either the second or third slide when we started the program. I saw an icon surrounded with an SJ, and after the icon, 44. What was the significance of that 44? SJ, icon.
Oh, that was a police academy class.
44.
44th Academy.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
My question was due to the liability requirement that San Jose imposed on firearms, privately held.
Yeah.
First thing I did when that was supposedly enacted, I called it my house policy. Is there liability policy available to cover that? First,
No.
and I knew that.
Yeah.
So what is your position? What is the status of this requirement? Because I know many people are not going to.
Yeah.
Tag along.
Yeah, well, I got myself into quite a bit of hot water last year for voting against the tax, the fee component of it. On the insurance front, I also made some calls and talked to our city attorney, and the interpretation at the end that I was left with was essentially the only requirement, and whether or not it's enforceable will be up to the courts, but thus far it has been upheld. There have been court challenges. It has been upheld, but the requirement is a general liability clause, that you have some kind of general liability, which most homeowners do have. So it shouldn't, there is, as far as I am aware, there's not some additional gun insurance that you can go buy.
Yes,
that, yeah.
Your insurance.
Yeah.
They will cover it if they have a limit of what those.
Okay.
Information.
Yeah.
But they will not grant any higher value. Typically, I think it's $2,000.
Okay.
And you have to provide them a list of firearms and service.
Yeah.
Now, my second follow on there is if you're not going to enforce it like that.
Yeah.
Like you said, how do you verify?
Yeah. I think the goal has been, and I don't know that there's an easy way to get there other than just personal responsibility, has been to get people to incentivize the treatment of firearms like other potential risks in the home. When somebody has a pool or a trampoline, that can get, when there's a home inspection, can get baked into your premium. It becomes part of the cost of your general liability on your homeowner's insurance because.
In this situation, it's almost impossible. Your gun is stolen. How's that liability in that?
Yeah.
You're not going to cover it.
No, you're right about that. I think what we want to incentivize, and frankly, I don't think we have a great mechanism for it, is incentivizing responsible gun ownership, being well trained, using the safe, using all the proper protocols around gun ownership and gun safety that responsible gun owners presumably understand and follow. And the goal would be to try to incentivize more gun owners to follow those procedures.
20% of gun owners.
Yep.
Want to get licensed and training.
Yep.
And follow up and they
Yep.
have no problem with it.
I'm with you. And the vast majority of gun owners are responsible and very careful. Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Yes, sir.
Matt, so the RV parked down our street about 3 blocks. We walk by it every day. The lady's been there for 3 years. It's parked. She's got a black can of her poop every day. You know, we don't know what. We can't get rid of her.
Yeah.
And the city apparently, this is what I've heard because I haven't physically talked to the city myself, but others have said on the next door, you know, they're frustrated because they just can't seem to get her out of our street, if you want to call it. So she's just parked in between houses. You know?
Yeah.
What is your take on that? How do we get more action from the city on that type of situation? RV.
Great question. RVs, lived-in vehicles, which tend to be RVs, but can also be other cars, sedans, we see that. So I've got two thoughts on it, and I'll tell you, you're right. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and as we saw the growth of unsheltered homelessness, the city basically made an exception to our parking enforcement and other sort of vehicle-related enforcement on the streets if the vehicle was lived in. Basically made the decision, I think, again, like so many of our policies, well-intended, right? A well-intended policy of saying, hey, if somebody's homeless, let's not make things worse. Let's not fine them. Let's try to help them turn their lives around. But we often, in these situations, don't really appreciate the impact on the broader community. And so I'm trying to strike the right balance here. And it's hard with government policy because we're dealing with a large and diverse population and at scale. So it's not so easy. It kind of does have to be one size fits all to be fair. So that's hard because everybody's got a different story and different circumstances. To me, the single best solution, because we have a lot of people living in vehicles out there. It's estimated to be well over 750 people just in RVs across the city. One thing that we are doing that I think is a really important solution and should be cost effective, frankly, is to go create safe parking sites in big empty, Coyote Valley, North San Jose, areas where we have a lot of land, and basically prohibit living in vehicles on city streets other than in designated safe parking sites. So we're beginning to build safe parking sites and require that people move into them. But again, kind of like our encampments, we don't have nearly the places for people to go relative to the number of people out there. And there's another problem with that, which is if we do it alone, we're going to end up with all the RVs from every other city near us that doesn't want to deal with the problem. So part of it is safe parking. The other thing, though, frankly, and I know this may sound a little harsh, is I think we're going to have to adopt a circulatory principle. I think we're going to have to go back to enforcing the 72-hour rule and making vehicles move around. And then we can, as we're making contact with people, we can start to triage their situation and try to figure out, okay, is this vehicle inoperable? How do we help them get it fixed so they can move it? Does this person, do they fall under this conservatorship law? Are they willing to accept temporary shelter? Is there some off-ramp for this person? Because if we don't intervene, it becomes a habit and a way of life, and it becomes permanent. And that's what I think we've failed to grasp with, is that we're allowing people to create a permanent pattern and habit around living in a tent or living in an RV in a place where you really shouldn't have people living long term. So that's the tricky situation we're in. It's not violating a crime that would get you jailed. It's enforcing basic traffic laws, and can we get the council to agree that it's worth actually enforcing something like the 72-hour rule if the vehicle has somebody living in it? I think we're going to have to, but I don't know that your city government is there yet. In fact, we're not currently.
Yeah.
So that's
Call the city councilman from my district and him or her to.
Talking to your council members, to your follow-up question there, is critically important. For better or worse, while I wish I was the CEO at City Hall, I've been CEO of a couple of tech companies and I loved it. The reality is every decision at City Hall is based on consensus. You need 6 out of 11 votes to do anything, and you really need 6 out of 11 consistently over time to set direction and then follow up and hold people accountable. And so at the end of the day, I just have 1 of 11 votes. So working on your council members, continuing to bring concrete examples of your concerns, really educating them on what you're experiencing, particularly in these core areas, safety, homelessness, blight, permitting, core city functions that only we can do and we have to do better, is really helpful helpful. Keep pushing your council members. I want them to feel the same urgency I feel from going out and knocking on 10,000 of your doors last year. So, yeah, I'm happy to take another question, but I don't know how, are we, is it?
You have another.
I'm going to be late? Okay, I'm so sorry. Let me say this, though. I'll just note two things quickly. I apologize to those of you. I'm going to be late to my next event. But number one, you can reach me and my team at mayor@sanjoseca.gov. So that's MAYOR. And we can follow up, and you guys can share this amongst the group, but mayor@sanjoseca.gov. The other thing is this, if you don't already get my email newsletter, I would encourage you to sign up. You can find it on the city website. Every other week, Sunday at 8 a.m., we send out an email newsletter that is all about these kinds of issues. It talks about the votes at city council. It talks about the policies and programs we're pursuing. And it offers some statistics and facts just to try to educate people and arms you with some information to be able to push your council members or push your county supervisor and be a more informed resident and voter. So if you're not already getting my weekly newsletter, I hope you'll consider signing up for it. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.